welcome to your 1 o'clock news update here on Nile TV International. I'm Nancy Sarah Barakat. Let's start off with a look at the news making headlines this hour. President Abdel al-Sisi urges citizens to actively participate in parliamentary elections. Egyptians abroad begin casting their votes in the first phase of the polls. And the electoral silence period inside Egypt continues as police and army forces announce high alert to secure polling stations. Welcome back. President Abdel al-Sisi has called on Egyptians to actively participate in their thousands in the first phase of parliamentary elections due to kick off here in the country on Sunday and Monday. In a brief television speech, al-Sisi urged voters to select the perfect candidates who they see fit to build a bright future amid the various challenges facing the country. The president stressed that the free and solid will of the Egyptian citizens is the only way to eliminate terrorism and fight those who want to hijack the nation under false slogans. On another front, al-Sisi noted that the country's success in winning the non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council had been achieved after long political and diplomatic efforts. Al-Sisi said that Egypt would push for achieving peace worldwide at the 15-member council and back the efforts aimed at achieving stability and development. Egyptians residing abroad have begun casting their votes in the country's first parliamentary election since 2013. Embassies and consulates in 139 countries will be open from 9 a.m. through to 9 p.m. according to each country's local time for voting for 2 days of voting. The Higher Election Commission said that the voting would not take place in Yemen, Syria, Libya and the Central African Republic due to their security reasons. The vote will mark the final step in a transition to democracy. The House of Representatives will comprise 596 members, including 448 elected as independents and 120 from party lists. The remaining will be appointed by the President. And for more on the voting abroad, we are joined now over the phone by Dr. Hamdy Gawad, the head of the Egyptian community in the Netherlands. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Hello, welcome.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about the turnout at the voting today.
Okay. First of all, I would like to give our compliments to Nile TV and also to our President, Mr. President Sisi, for all the efforts he have doing and continuing doing it for the welfare of the Egyptian in general and also not for the Egyptian abroad. We form one community where we are.
Right.
In Holland, we have got about 50,000 Egyptians, including our beautiful second generation. We are really very pleased and we are very glad to be a witness of the start of the democratic process in another way in Egypt.
Well, tell us a little bit about the turnout, the atmosphere there where the voting is taking place.
Well, it is like this, that everybody is waiting, in fact, for the outcome of this election. The election is very important for the outside world in order to see and to know that Egypt is going well there, and the terrorists and every kind of what they are doing against the people, those terrorists, they have to be punished, but at the same time, continuation of improvement, investments have to go on.
Dr. Hamdy, is the media back in Holland closely watching the developments here in Egypt and these elections?
Well, they are very aware of the fact that, and they cannot deny it also, and they have, there was a silence concerning this point, but in the same time they are aware of the fact that it's going well in Egypt. The second Suez Canal is an evidence of that, and everybody is waiting, in fact, for a secure environment for the terrorists, for the tourists, and afterwards you will get the investment Egypt needs and every other country needs in such a situation.
Right.
Yeah. So it's in fact how we can prove to the outside world that the environment in Egypt is not so bad to go, to enjoy the sun, to enjoy the weather, to enjoy Sharm el-Sheikh and Al-Ghada, and also Cairo, and at the same time, it must be, there must be investments, in fact.
Well, I thank you very much, Dr. Hamdy Abdel Gawad, head of the Egyptian community in the Netherlands. Back here in Egypt, the silence period continues in 14 governorates, where the first phase of the 2015 parliamentary elections will be held on Sunday and Monday. It is banned during the electoral silence of all parties, candidates, and the closed-list systems to campaign or practice any kind of activity. Media is also banned from tackling any topic that revolves around the elections and propagate for certain candidates. Let's go over now to China, and we're being joined by Mrs. Hoda, Fouad, Information Counselor to the Egyptian Embassy in the Chinese capital, Beijing. Thank you very much for your time. Well, we'll try to bring Mrs. Hoda back. Let's go on, or move on rather, with more news related to the elections. And the armed forces have begun implementing measures to secure the parliamentary polls, putting more than 185,000 officers and soldiers on high alert. Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces, General Mahmoud Hegazi, inspected forces of the Central Military Zone to check on the forces' preparedness ahead of the polls. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Interior announced high alert as forces and explosive experts began deploying at polling stations where the elections would be held. About 180,000 police officers and conscripts will take part in a plan to secure voting stations until the counting of ballot ends. We do have Mrs. Hoda Fouad joining us now from the Chinese capital, Beijing. She is the Information Counselor to the Egyptian Embassy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Please tell us a little bit about today's turnout, the voting process itself, and obviously the overall atmosphere at your end.
The Egyptian Embassy receives the Egyptian voters from 9 o'clock in the morning, and also there is another polling station in Shanghai. The number of Egyptian voting today is relatively small, but
right.
The Egyptian community in China is already very small. They are mostly Egyptian students and businessmen. But I think tomorrow the number will be much bigger.
Could you tell us a little bit also about the preparations by the embassy to facilitate the voting process?
Yeah, we are receiving phone calls and we are sending by WeChat and by all media all the information about the voting. We are also sending SMS. And tomorrow, I think there is a gathering for students in the embassy to cast their vote.
Right. And finally, I'd also like to know a little bit about the media coverage at your end. Has the media been covering these elections much?
Yeah. There is coverage from Xinhua, the main news agency. There is a covering from Cairo and there is a covering from Beijing also. Today there is a reporter from Xinhua in the embassy. He stayed for about 2 or 3 hours to follow the voting process.
Okay, I thank you very much. Hopefully I'll speak to you again tomorrow to find out more about that. Mrs. Hoda Fouad, information counselor to the Egyptian embassy in the Chinese capital, Beijing. More local news. In the Cairo Criminal Court has adjourned to December 20th the trial of Alaa and Gamal Mubarak, both being accused of committing violations in the selling of the National Bank of Egypt. Meanwhile, the Giza Criminal Court has resumed the trial of defendants loyal to what is known as Ejnad Misr, or Egypt soldiers. The defendants are accused of targeting security checkpoints, police stations and public facilities, as well as killing several police officers and civilians. Minister of Foreign Affairs FM Shoukri is expected to meet Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov visiting the country. The meeting is expected to tackle cooperation between Cairo and Moscow that has seen a boom in almost all fields, including politically, economically and diplomatically. To regional news now, and 2 Palestinians were shot dead when they tried to stab Israelis in separate attacks in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, gripped by the worst street violence in years. In the first attack in a Jewish settlement in the West Bank city of Hebron, a Palestinian attempted to stab an Israeli civilian as the Israeli, who was carrying a gun, shot and killed the attacker. 2 weeks of violence have been triggered in part